Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, Carlo Parcelli here. I'll be your host for today.
Undoubtedly, Africa is the best tourism destination on Earth. The continent is blessed with the most conducive atmosphere. To feel and enjoy these blessings, join the most productive one-week tour of the continent organized by Daylight Africa every September 2nd to September 9th to see beyond the fallacies about Africa on the mainstream media. Contact us at daylightafrica@gmail.com or call 718-822-5555. Daylight Africa. Revolutionizing tourism industries in Africa.
Hello, let me start again. Good day. My name's Carlo Parcelli. I'll be your host for today. I'm joined by our two expert co-hosts, Ben Toth from Hungary and Billy Bob from the People's Republic of California. And our topic today is damned if you do or damned if you don't. We're going to talk about the destruction of the Ukrainian dam and its relationship to the failures of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And we're going to kick it off. Who wants to start us off? Ben, Billy Bob?
I'd love to. I'd love to give some context
and
an introduction and then get your thoughts on it. Because last week, pretty much as we went off air, during the weekend, the so-called vaunted counteroffensive pretty much started, even though the Ukrainian ad was, shh, don't say anything about it. And for a week, we've been hearing that these were probing operations or active reconnaissance. And what numbers we got so far from the Russian Ministry of Defense, which is not Igor Konoshenkov, I think, the usual guy who tells you the numbers, but Sergei Shoigu himself, the Minister of Defense, is horrendous. Thousands of people, hundreds of tanks and artillery and armored fighting vehicles. Obviously, this is the Russian side. We don't hear anything from the Ukrainian side, but it looks terrible and slaughter. And then a couple of days ago, this is why we can't create topics for the show like a week earlier, because something unexpected happens. The Khakovska dam, or Novaya Khakovska dam, or hydroelectric power station, busted. And it created a huge, what you heard from the West was an eco-catastrophe, eco-terrorism. And immediately, like within hours, all the Western leaders, without any evidence, without an investigation, immediately blamed Russia for this act of terrorism. And there's a curious case to be made here. And we have a bunch of theories, which I think we'll discuss. But let's just get some facts off the ground before we do. The dam, built in mid-1950s by the Soviet Union, another mega construction, was under Russia's control the whole time. They were defending it. Fact number one. Fact number two, back in October 2022, Vasilina Benzia, the permanent representative to the UN of Russia, handed over a paper warning the UN that Zelensky will, in desperation, try to destroy this dam. This is October. In December, I think the Washington Post or the New York Times, I'm not sure, WAPO, interviewed this Major General Kolvachuk, who is a Ukrainian Major General, who said, yes, there is an active plan to destroy this dam, and we have done test strikes with US-made HIMARS on the floodgates to see if it works, but we won't do it only as an act of final desperation. Those were his words back in October. And now it happened. And just to add a little more to this story is the very next day, Ukraine, and this is beyond dispute, disrupted in, I think, the Kharkov area, the Togliatti-Odessa ammonia pipeline, which was, you might have seen these images or videos on social media with this white, terrible poisonous substance just streaming in every position. And so far, I think there haven't been deaths, but there are injuries and drawbacks to this. That was the big main event, like almost an 80-year-old dam blown up while Ukraine can produce no tangible results for this NATO-sponsored offensive. And who benefits? What happened? There are numerous theories. Let's go with what Billy Bob thinks first and then go to Carlo.
Well, Ben, why would Russia do that? That's what I want you to. So Russia obviously did it, but why? No, so it's in dispute. So who benefits? Who benefits the most? Like who benefits is in dispute. So I've heard analysts say that it benefits Russia in the following ways, and then I've heard other analysts say it benefits Ukraine in the following way. So who does it benefit more? There's so many different theories out there. But it seems clear to me. So Dima, for instance, Dima at Military Summary Channel, he seems unsure, and he presents both sides, and he says, viewers can decide for themselves. That was the most recent thing I think he said. But to me, it seems like it was, like you said, like an act of desperation by Ukraine because their counteroffensives were going nowhere. And so to me, I mean, that seems like the logical conclusion. But let's try and give voice to the opposing views. So what are some of the arguments that Russia benefited from this? I mean, it's in the short term, it's unusable. So the section between the dam going out to the sea is all flooded, and there's not going to be any incursion during that time by Ukraine. But was Russia scared of that incursion happening, and therefore they blew the dam? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So plus, when the waters recede in a couple of weeks, it'll be easier access than had existed prior to the dam being exploded, right? And so it might be setting up a larger counteroffensive by Ukraine, and that's a possibility. So once the waters recede, we'll see an actual much bigger offensive from Ukraine. Like, I don't discount that as a possibility. I don't know but it might displace some of the mines. The edge of the river was mined, and maybe the flooding is going to displace the mines and make the traversing of that area, easier and less lethal for Ukraine. So somebody help me out.
I'd love to chime back in, but let's, Carlo.
Yeah. Let me just say, I also have gotten some excellent information from Moon of Alabama, who laid all of this out. Now, I'm going to jump to Douglas McGregor and what he said about when the waters subside. And I think he said something that made a lot of common sense. I'm going to steal one of Alex McCoris's line. I'm not a military expert by any stretch, but Doug McGregor said that when the waters subside, the banks will be too muddy for any kind of invasion from either side. So if that would speak to the Ukrainians being involved. And another thing that would speak to the Ukrainians being involved, apparently they moved about 10 to 20,000 of the troops they had on the Zaporozhye banks up to the Bakhmut and northern area. Also the city that's the one that's been responsible for shelling Donetsk city for most. It begins with an A. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Now it's Artyomovsk or Artemovsk.
Yes, thank you. Repeat it again, because for our audience. What was
Artyomovsk or Artemovsk? I've seen both on the Russian net.
Yeah, so that has a certain common sense aspect to it too. So I just thought I'd throw that out. But there's
it kind of shortens the line of contact and frees up more soldiers for a possible counteroffensive in the future in a different area. Yeah. But it also, you'd think, would free up also Russian defenders, and allow them to also move to other areas too.
Well,
but now, what about the Crimea water? Yes, the reservoir right above the dam helps supply Crimea with water, and with that dam gone, that reservoir is going to subside, and it's going to affect Crimea's access to water. So Dima seemed to think that the blowing up of the dam is not going to affect Crimea's water supply, but everybody else I've heard said it is going to affect Crimea's water supply. So
Hello, Dust James. Greetings to you. I was going to bring in, because there's more context to this, especially geography. I wish we could, I was better prepared and we could just bring in a map. But the Zaporizhia station is way south of the ZPP, the Zaporizhia, the power plant that Ukraine's been shelling, but not lately. It's very well defended. That's about midway. And then you go all the way up the river, and then you get to Dnipro, which is another dam, which is intact and under the control of Ukraine. So when this plan hatched and people warned about, Nabenzia warned about a possible Ukrainian attack on this dam, the Khakovska dam, what Surovikin did was retreat from pretty much all of Kherson. That's what they call the big Kherson offensive. Look, we're winning. All of Russia retreated to the safe places. If the dam was flooded, we don't want to be caught underwater and all that. But lower down, what's happened was basically the mined and layered defense systems that Russia has built. Those are in now bogland, marshland areas. So that doesn't seem to be a huge advantage. And there's a second detail, and I've seen video evidence of this, 2 different sources, that upper dam that I just talked about, the Dnipro one, all of the floodgates have been open for over a week. And that means in preparation to make this flood even worse.
Yeah.
I mean, if Ukraine cared about the people, the animals that they keep posting now, from basically a Serbian kid trying to save his drowned dog many, many years ago, they're using those pictures now, would be better if Ukraine had shut that off to try to help, to try to, bring a humane end to this. So that's some context, I think, that nobody so far took into account.
You did a really good, you did a good job, Ben, at the very beginning of laying out the actual facts that that definitely point towards Ukraine culpability. And the final one, of course, is, like you said, keeping those floodgates wide open to maximize the amount of damage and the amount of water that gets unleashed and goes through there. So, I mean, taken all together, it's a no-brainer for people. Nevertheless, all the Western officials are immediately blaming Russia. So, I mean, it's as we would expect. And of course, they blame Russia immediately and reflexively without any kind of investigation, which is also telling that, it's bullshit.
Very true, but I'd add some other things. Hi, Shanika, regular friend of the show.
Yes, hi,
to say greetings. One of them, these weird coincidences, not the last one, was James Cleverly, and I don't remember his title, but he's not the PM, but some sort of big poncho in the UK. He left Kiev the very day before this counteroffensive, where he was trying to expedite, like meaning hurry up more weapons shipments. And as he returned to London, he's doing this rebuilding summit for Ukraine. So I don't rule out the British from this either. I know this is, take it with a pinch of salt. We are speculating, but I can never rule out the English in this. Maybe they've broken free from, the US's control, because the US, for its part, so far has responded. We do not have this is the White House. We do not have definitive answers as to who did it. But as you said, these people from not Olaf Scholz, not the German, not Germany, not Spain, not the Western European countries, but Charles Michel, Ursula von der Leyen, Rishi Sunak, all of these jumped on the bandwagon within hours to say condemn Russia. Where's the investigation? No, we don't want an investigation. It's done. So far, the only politician I've seen who wants an investigation, who has been on the line with Kiev and Moscow, is President Erdogan, Sultan Erdogan. He's the only one who wants an international investigation, whereas Nord Stream got one. And, we still don't know what happened there. But here it's not necessary. It's not needed. That's
so Russia brought it up at the Security Council, right? Russia brought up, and also Ukraine, I think, brought it up.
Ukraine was the first.
Russia.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why you get stupid headlines like the two powers blaming each other. Like that, it's not a very equal thing. But go, CARLO.
I just wanted to add one thing about the clean water in Crimea. The Ukrainians have cut off fresh water to Crimea before. So that prompted the Russians to begin a new alternative water system. And my understanding is they were about to complete it just about at the time that the dam was blown up. And I'm not have any further information on whether or not fresh water is flowing through this new Russian system or not, or whether it was affected by this explosion. But that's I just wanted to put that out there. This is not the cutting off fresh Ukraine cutting off fresh water to Crimea is not a new thing.
And it's not. And George Soros, the very next day in Project Syndicate, wrote this huge, very long and very eye-watering, boring op-ed, his opinion piece. And with it, when he gets to the Ukraine conflict in his polycrisis, he said, we should attack Crimea. We should make it dependent on Ukraine for water. But as you said, this plan was in action. And I have one final thing. This is not concrete evidence, but it is a statement by, I forgot his name, the governor of the Crimean region, saying this will not severely affect our water things because we have alternate reservoirs which are pretty much at capacity, like 90%. He said that. I don't know what's behind it, but they seem, at least he seems to be pretty relaxed about the water situation, which, as you said, for years was a very, very bad crisis. I mean, Zelensky the clown, when he was still an actor, he made joking skits about people being thirsty, very, very thirsty in Crimea, and all of the Ukrainian, the crowd laughed. So it was a serious matter.
Yeah, they would be derelict if they just allowed that reservoir to be their sole water source, and as vulnerable as it is. So I hope that they're not going to be affected. I hope they've made other arrangements, other systems, reservoirs that they can, draw from for years to come. That's the smart thing to do. But yeah, definitely Britain, and the United States and NATO are on the ground directing the tactics and strategy of Ukraine. To believe that Ukraine makes these decisions with sovereignty, I think is preposterous. But
absolutely, yeah, I'm with you.
And to take the long view about Ukrainian hostility toward Crimea, Poroshenko had famously said that our children will be going to schools while the Crimean children will be cowering in their basements. And, it kind of indicates that maybe the dam explosion and a number of other incidences that occurred are the handiwork of the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
And as Billy Bob points out, MI6 and the CIA.
Yeah, I wish we had the ability to share a picture, and I wish I had it, but I don't know if we brought it up last week. The base of that sentence, that beautiful thing from Poroshenko last week, there was a picture of him in a shelter, in a basement, and it was like perfect poetic justice. Like years after those words had exited his lips.
He didn't look that happy. He was he was in a bomb shelter, cowering, and yeah, it was sweet, sweet justice, sweet karma.
Yeah. I mean, what do you make that this thing happens? The US is very weird to me because all of Europe is screaming eco-terrorism, dam terrorism, all of that. But basically the UN and the Red Cross refused to send any funds. And apparently Zelensky was upset about this. But the next day, let's see, I think it was the Washington Post. US intelligence. Yeah, NBC News. US intelligence points to Russia behind the dam. Behind the dam attack? Sorry, I thought it was the next day I read that Ukraine was behind Nord Stream for the, I don't know how many time, like throwing that guy under the bus, but keeping Zelensky clean. Within that article, it was said that these scuba divers, the 6 guys on the Andromeda yacht, were apparently under the direct command of Mr. Zaluzhny, the commander in chief of the forces of Ukraine, which I thought was very strange. So Zelensky he washed his hands, and this guy who we haven't seen for a couple of weeks gets the full blame. Yeah.
My compliments to the screenwriter that came up with that narrative. It checks every single box. It exculpates Biden. It exculpates Zelensky. It exculpates Ukraine, the government. Zelensky, the Zelensky government, and it exculpates the U.S. government. And it blames, the general that probably, isn't going to be a general anymore. Like he's either, he's been incapacitated or he's been killed because we haven't seen him for weeks. But yeah, no, what a perfect person to scapegoat. And it's like, it's a real great story that checks all the boxes, but it's nonsense. Like, why did you blame Russia if you knew it was Ukraine the whole time?
It's the timing,
reflexively say it was Russia that did it at the beginning. So it's just too convenient. And preposterous. I'm waiting to see if Cy Hirsch, does a detailed response to the nonsense.
Me too. Oh, me too.
And I know we haven't exhausted this topic, but Shaniqua sort of suggested a roundabout way this recession that's now hit Germany hard,
and the Eurozone, the entire Eurozone,
because of the green, largely because of the green policies. So it's the irony of it. Shaniqua lives in Buffalo, New York, and as you all know, they're getting all of this particulate matter from the wildfires in Canada. We're even getting it down here in Washington, D.C.
Hundreds of wildfires, yes.
Yeah, and New York is just a mess. And so you have this another environmental disaster that has occurred in Ukraine. Repeatedly, one after another, depleted uranium shells being exploded. And I want to add, I forgot to mention this on our previous shows, but you can't blame the Russians because they switched to tungsten decades ago. So they're not doing this. That was the British sending that crap over there. And of course, all the other environmental disasters associated with a war like this. And so the Green Party, by supporting Ukraine, is actually contributing to not only the deep recession that's gripping Germany and, as Ben points out, all of Europe, but environmental disaster. It's so crazy out there. Anybody want to elaborate?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know why there's so many wildfires in your northern neighbor, Canada, but I've seen the photo. Sorry, it's just droughts. Okay, yeah. It's just it looks post-apocalyptic. I think this is how they try to paint China's cities, who have this beautiful blue sky, but they looked like this in the 90s, and now, oddly enough, New York looks like that. But when it comes to environmental disasters that are not spoken of in climate circles, Greta Thunberg circles, first there was Nord Stream. Second, there was which is terrible, this the dam explosion. The third one is the ammonia pipeline, which, by the way, supplied Russian ammonia to Europe. Hopefully that will accept one or two people, but I haven't seen any outrage over that so far. And
the Ukrainians, a vain attempt to blow up the nuclear power plant at Zaporozhye.
Yes.
Oh my God! Well, if they had made that one,
the ZPP could have been the worst since Chernobyl, absolutely, and depleted uranium. This is one after the other. And Dust, I completely agree with your point. By the way, both Nicolas Patrushev and Nikolai Patrushev, who is the head of the Security Council, and of course Medvedev, who we know, the loudmouth, have said that there is no animosity and there's no war between the Ukrainian and the Russian people. The elites have been captured in Ukraine and are being used basically to attack Russia. He's made this very clear. And by the way, ever since these terrorist attacks began, including the dam, they claim to have hit this goes back to Zaluzhny, but also a guy called Budanov, decision-making centers in Kiev. I haven't seen Budanov for a long, long time. There are rumors, this we can't treat as fact, that he's gone. But yeah, I'm not sure where I was taking that train of thought. I'm sorry, I stumbled there.
So, yeah, I mean, I wanted to go back to the Greens in Germany and say a few things about them. But yeah, he was the head of the intelligence, right? Ukrainian intelligence head. Yes. Shortly after the attack it was the attack at the Kremlin, the drone attack at the Kremlin, that there was a Dagger missile attack at the headquarters of the intelligence community. And we're thinking there was at least one CIA person died, because I think we talked about that last show, maybe.
I think we did, yeah. It was a bunker buster, so it was a little pop above ground, but apparently there was a bunker hundreds of meters underground that was hit by.
And we assume a CIA agent died because a star was added at Langley. And then that one, Budanov, or whatever his name is, I'm butchering it. And
Budanov is good, yeah.
Who knows how many others. So, but as far as, the Greens, so I think Angela Merkel was a little bit of a even keel, and she wasn't all for sacrificing Germany, to attack Russia with the West. And so they had a long time. The U.S. had a long time to prepare a government to replace her, and they labeled it Greens. But a better label for Greens
Krieg.
I can't find my fingers. A better label for Greens is, the pro-war party. So the
Krieg.
war hawk.
Yeah.
So the Greens, that was literally nothing. I mean, what it did for them, I guess it made them close a lot of their coal plants, and it made them even more dependent on, Russian energy, which didn't make much sense. But now the Green Party, it's the pro-war, and because they closed all those coal plants, I mean, there's a bad recession, and I know from your work, Ben, that you shared with us, Germany has lost, scores of industries have declared bankruptcy or, become insolvent due to not having access to cheap, affordable energy.
Basically,
so the Greens have really fucked Germany, and I think that was the U.S. expected that to happen because to the U.S., Germany isn't an ally that we want to support and develop and empower and make the people happy and what's the opposite of poverty? Prosperous. We don't care about that. We're going to just use them just like we're using the Ukrainians, to further our hegemonic interests. But okay, I've ranted.
But violent vegans. We have to remember that part of all this huge plan to destabilize Russia was also to destabilize Europe, particularly Germany. But Ben's list of companies collapsing in Germany is impressive. Can you share a little bit of that with us?
I mean, I wish it wasn't boring to read them off, but it's literally a full page full of these. And I'm just going to say that in numerous sectors, there's 100-year-old bakeries, there's plastic works, machine manufacturing.
One of them was hundreds of years old. One of them was built in the 1600s, right?
Well, there's, for instance, a more than 300-year-old traditional slaughterhouse, which is Ruhr's Butchery, filed bankruptcy. It was established in 1709.
Okay,
I mean, there's so many of them. I just wish it wasn't, but it paints the serious picture. I'm going to paste it somewhere or send it over to Billy Bob to share.
When are you going to get your website up and running, Ben?
Well, I got the domain, but I am working on building it. It's seriously.
So we'll promote that for you, and that would be a great place to post, your weekly summaries. But
yes, it will definitely have a place there. I'll post it on Twitter too, in case anybody's interested. But it's just so many. I would probably bore all of our viewers to death with it. But what's stunning is Germany is officially in a recession now. London, as in the UK, which is not in the Eurozone, has the policy has been to massage the numbers enough that we look like we're not in a recession, but they're terrible. When it comes to food inflation, consumer price inflation, they're in recession too. And now, just a couple of days ago, the entire Eurozone has come out with the news, this is Eurostat data, that the whole thing is in recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters of shrinkage. So it really is devastated. And what do? Apparently follow the US into decoupling, or now called de-risking, with China, the main market and the factory of the world. Thank goodness there are some sober voices coming out also within Germany from the still existing industries saying that's even more suicide than we have committed so far. That's basically the death of industry here. So it's just getting bolts and walls, everything off the ground from Germany, taking it to elsewhere. Either the US or China has been the end of it. But we'll get back with a little bit more because I think we're heading to that hard break. And I always try to time this right. Hopefully we get it right this time.
We're maybe a little early for the hard break.
I'm just looking at the minutes. Sorry. So it's 30 now.
What do we want to talk about in the second half?
We'll get back to you with some Asian, West Asian, and Russian news, I think.
Sounds good. Let's have a hard break now, and we'll come back in a.
I had a thought too, and then lost it. So maybe if we go to break, I can remember it.
Okay. All right. Well, it's not happening. Another thing.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer. This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you.
And we're back.
And somebody had some follow-up thoughts. I have some of mine as well, but
Yeah,
I think you both wanted to
go with you, Ben.
Okay, so based on back to the Greens for just a minute and a little bit more of Europe. I don't know if you guys know, but people are moving all over the world. Lavrov is in Kyrgyzstan. I think Maduro was the one who ended up meeting Brazilian people. And then they sent Annalena Baerbock to the Latin American nations, namely to Brazil, where he wasn't met by Lula or his foreign minister. Nobody met this woman. And she was just in this hall lecturing the Brazilians, like scolding them, because apparently most Brazilians care more about the price of rice and beans than they do about Ukraine. And that's a bad thing. That is just the end of the German brand. To someone this stupid, I think maybe even Ursula is smarter than this. Maybe Scholz, who we've seen recently doing a rally, everybody booed this guy and said he was a warmonger. And maybe he's a smarter doormat than Miss Baerbock, the 360 girl. That's also the same party.
Didn't Maduro recently visit China?
Anyway.
Anyway,
I know he was in Turkey.
He was in Turkey for the coronation, the inauguration.
I was trying to nail that down. And you're talking about, are you talking about Lula's people in being dressed down by Baerbock?
Yes, all of Latin America through the Brazilian people, Lula's people, saying, we are disappointed that you care more about food prices than you do about Ukraine. I don't know how many thousands of kilometers away. And apparently that's disappointing to this German woman.
Yeah, who's never been hungry a fucking day in her life.
Nope. Yeah.
These people need to be punched.
That's the synthetic Green Party for you.
See, they need people in these diplomatic delegates that'll just go right up and punch these assholes in the face. I'm sorry. I'm getting it. My real nature is coming out.
I just
my
love
true nature. Go ahead, Billy Bob.
I remember my thought before break. It was just to hit home the fact that time is on, the side of Russia and China, because Europe is being asked to just sacrifice and they're basically just stabbing themselves in the eye, and that can't go on indefinitely. Eventually, there's going to be an election cycle. And people are going to say, why are we sacrificing for something that doesn't benefit us? Like, why are we doing this? And it's not sustainable. So the good news is, Russia, China, they have the time on their side. And, the pain is just going to be increasing for the European citizenry. And you would think that they're going to very quickly, hopefully before too long, decide that we don't need to do that. And there's going to be some resistance, and there's going to be, an opposition to it. And that's going to threaten everything the U.S. is trying to do right now.
I didn't know this could last 1.5 years of harakiri. I thought this would be much faster to resist this insanity. Macron tried, and then he was pretty fastly silenced to have strategic autonomy, like a policy away from the dependency on the United States. So right now, what's the resistance axis? It is happening. Hungary, obviously the bad boy of the EU, they're fighting from our presidency of the European Parliament that we shouldn't apply because we don't represent their fucking values. To demonstrate their values, the European Union has threatened to block all of Twitter because it doesn't Elon Musk doesn't comply with the so-called disinformation rules that we have here in Europe. One of them is facing either 30 days in prison or paying a 900 euro fine, which just happened in Germany, for supporting the special military operation on social media, for having an opinion. Those are the values that we have here. The other is Serbia, which we know from Milorad Dodik, the president of Republika Srpska, that it is suffering from a color revolution attempt by British intelligence. These are his words. What else is there left? I mean, Poland is the new, what do you call it, U.S. territory, except I just read 2 days ago, I think, a WAPO op-ed, and one of the authors was Polish, who said Poland is not the friend that the US thinks it is, because it's been democratically backsliding and it really doesn't love liberal democracy. So even there's beginning a shift away from, away from this whole project. And when it comes to time, as you mentioned, I'd just like to remind people there were statements before this counteroffensive, before last weekend. Zelensky said, we're ready, but we'd like to have 50 Patriot systems, right? Reznikov, the guy who in charge of the military, said, we need 120 planes, and these will contain F-16s, of course, but we also want Gripens, and we also want Eurofighters, right? There was another plea. This was by one of, I think, Melnik, who is the foreign minister, that we actually want from Germany, like outspoken, he's a Twitter guy, so he posts official stuff on Twitter, saying we want that cruise missile, not the Storm Shadow that they have, but the German version. I'm blanking on its name, that has 500 kilometers range. Do you know the name of it? Moscow. He was pleading for this, right? And basically the meme came alive because we got this statement from a previous NATO General Secretary, Mr. Anders Rasmussen, a Swede, not a Norwegian, who said that a lot of NATO states, which means led by Poland, which means Poland and the Baltics, will probably send some troops if Ukraine doesn't get security guarantees from the United States at the upcoming, I think that's July, NATO summit at Vilnius. And there's been a lot of talk of that. So basically, it's the meme where NATO, the EU, and US is poking Ukraine, saying, do counteroffensive, come on, do it. Basically, that's what happened. We don't have any more time for you. And there was just the other day on television, I just want to mention this. I wish I know where I put it. That guy who was a previous US security guarantor, not a security minister, something like that. Yeah, Mark Esper, he was a previous Secretary of Defense. He said this on CNN, I think today or the other day, that Ukraine must show a return on investment by a successful counteroffensive before we can do anything else. That's clear speech as you will ever get. Like,
Yeah.
show me what you can do before we can send you anything else. That's
Wall Street. I want to, and they don't understand the word blowback. I mean, sooner or later, we're going to hear about F-16 training for ISIL, because ISIL has gotten their hands on a dozen F-16s, and they're targeting the people they don't like. That's what's going to happen. Now, Britain has just got this 27-year-old ninny to be a person who's going to filter out the propaganda that would infest the minds of the Britons.
I think you mean the BBC Verify program, right?
What's that?
The BBC Verify program.
Yes, that's it. That's
it.
And I can't remember her name. Strong or some Virginia Strong or something.
Me neither.
I don't know.
That video was amazing.
He's an expert. He's an expert at truth, Carlo. You don't understand. She knows truth. And
I don't
she's
know.
An expert.
I wouldn't trust a 27-year-old to go and get five pieces of from the grocery store for me and get it correct, much less. I mean, it's obvious this is bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, the Biden administration floated some lady to do the same thing here, and nobody went for it.
I was just going to say it was the British version of Nina Yankovic or Yankovic. I remember the singing Ministry of Truth lady.
Okay, I got one for you guys.
Go.
All right, you two communists. Okay, now you avowed communists. Very intelligent guys, okay? Doug McGregor has been on this trip about this new book relatively new book by Alan Weeks. And Alan Weeks made the proposition and that the USSR would not have been able to defeat the Nazis without Roosevelt and Lend-Lease. And this is part I've been able to suss out. And that the USSR never paid back the money it it owed the U.S. under Lend-Lease, whereas France and England did. Now, I know for a fact that the reason the USSR did not pay back that money was they were promised favored nation status, favored trade status, and they were never given it. They were, and people can just shut the fuck up about writing me about it, because by the time Russia got favored nation status, 1996, it wasn't the Soviet Union anymore.
Nope.
So shut up. This is just a shout out to my correspondent friends. So I'd like to hear your opinion.
I was watching that Douglas McGregor video, and he was going off about, and I was like, oh my God, this guy. And then I had to go to work, and I didn't get to hear all of it. But I mean, I saw where he was going, and it's typical. It's typical what you see in the mainstream. The fact is that the Battle of Moscow was pretty much the turning point. I mean, so by the time the Battle of Moscow was won, absolutely zero Lend-Lease was given to the Soviets. Like, they did not receive anything through Lend-Lease before they won the Battle of Moscow. And then, I mean, the Battle of Stalingrad came after that, and maybe 10% of Lend-Lease was given before, Stalingrad, and then later Kursk. So the vast majority of Lend-Lease was received by Russia after it was a foregone conclusion that the Soviets were going to win, and they were already marching on Berlin. So Lend-Lease did very little to help the Soviets win, but it did. I mean, they were going to win regardless of Lend-Lease or not. And Lend-Lease, of course, helped, and it helped them, to win with less loss of life and less trouble. But it was already a foregone conclusion before Lend-Lease even got there. I mean, Stalin couldn't believe Hitler invaded so late in the year. That's why he was kind of shocked. Like, it's so late in the year. What are they thinking? And then when they didn't have, they never bought. So Soviet, spies were looking at wool. They were looking at the wool market because they knew if Germany was going to attack, they would need to equip their soldiers with wool winter uniforms. And that never happened. And that's one of the reasons Stalin never thought they would attack so late in the year. And they never issued the troops any winter clothing, any winter gear, the Nazis. And so, I mean, it was going to be a failure from the very beginning. But for sure, by the time the Battle of Moscow was won, and the main assault was repulsed, there was no help from the West. There was no help from the West at all before the battle. Anyway, that's a tangent. Yeah. I always argue that with people on Facebook. Like, that's one of the arguments I get in all the time with idiots.
I'll get on this train as well, if allowed, because but not just it didn't change the course of the war, because the tide of battle was already turned, but all the way back before 1942 Operation, like at the time when France was invaded, Stalin looked for a united front against fascism with the West, and it was always denied, only until it was obvious that this war against the Soviet Union would fail. That's when they said, okay, we'll help you too. So all of that stuff, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to experts, I like Douglas McGregor for his military expertise, but anything he utters before 1990 he's a Cold Warrior that never reformed. And for me, it's particularly delightful to see someone like Scott Ritter, who I consider a hero, because he wants to make rapprochement between the Russian and American people on the basis of people, not elites, like make friendship again. He's a reformed Cold Warrior. He said it many times. He was trained to kill Soviets, to destroy the Soviet Union. And now he's finally opened his eyes to people like Caleb Maupin and the CPI and said, you dirty commies, I was taught, my mum said that I should kill you, and you're making the most sense in the whole entire city. So I'm seeing that. Douglas McGregor, take all of history that he was taught with a pinch of salt. I mean, I've seen recently from, I think, Indian and Russian sources that a lot of, especially Eastern European history, will need some rewriting, guys. Not rewriting, but reconsideration, because a lot of it was based on lies. And a final addition to that, what is a Soviet concept which has turned into a Russian concept is forgiveness. Because my country, Hungary, we were part of the attackers. Our ruler, Horthy, was buddy bosom friends with Adolf. Okay, we sent people into those camps. I'm very ashamed to say they are monsters in our past. We were defeated. Well, Budapest was liberated. Apparently, some Hungarians rose up. They were called the Buda Volunteer Regiment. They were the heroes of the time. After that, we owed reparations to the Soviet Union, and 80% of them were forgiven. And 1 out of every 5 worker who created the fastest reconstruction in Eastern European soil were Russians. Basically, they sent the trains, they sent, ore, raw minerals, all that, and helped this country rise. And Russia has inherited this exactly when it comes to this, like 20 African nations have been forgiven Russian debt. I mean, tell me what Western state ever does that. So that's what I'd add to that story.
Genuinely forgiven news. I also want to add that to our audience, especially that when Billy Bob talks about it mitigated loss of life, Lend-Lease to a certain degree. Still 27 million, that's the popular number. 27 million Soviet people died in World War II. And I have to say, I find McCorris more reliable, and he also supports Billy Bob's statements. He said all 3 of the aforementioned battles, of course, Stalingrad and Moscow, occurred essentially before Lend-Lease.
Yes. We've had Jacques Powell's on this show, so he's a friend of the show, and he's a great historian, and so I learned a lot about that time, from reading his articles. We can have him back sometime to get that point home. I'd want to pivot to the July 10th meeting in Vilnius about the NATO meeting. That's a big story. I want to touch on that some more. I don't know if you guys want to do anything else.
I'd like to just put it's difficult to put the number 27 million into context, but leading up to Victory Day, which was May 9th in Russia, the biggest holiday, like general holiday. This is wholeheartedly celebrated by the people. It's not a government show or anything like that. I did a calculation, and basically, if we had a minute of silence for all those Soviet people who died in what they call the Great Patriotic War, we would be silent for 51, almost 52 years. That's how you conceptualize a number like that. That's horrific. Everybody had a family member, a brother, a mother, someone who gave their life for their country, and that is what Russia still is continuing in all these interviews. They say, why are we going? Not because we hate these people, but because we've been attacked, and I will not bring dishonor to my grandfather. That's still the sentiment to this day.
And that's why it's appalling when they do all these, these ceremonies, remembrances of World War II in Europe, and they don't invite Russia. Like, that's appalling.
Especially they didn't invite Russia to the Auschwitz, the day of the liberation of the Auschwitz camp, which was done by the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
It's horrific. That's revision of history, like on. And
I mean, again, the West just supported Hitler, Britain especially. It was Britain especially that really wanted, Russia to just go east. They wanted to give them a free hand in going east, as long as, hey, just leave us alone, expand east, take out the communists, build a big buffer, please. And so that was another reason, Stalin didn't want to do a lot of defensive kind of maneuvers right before Operation Barbarossa, because he was afraid that any movement that he did would be used as a pretext, and then Hitler would say, look what they're doing, now we have to attack because they're getting ready to attack us. So he was trying to keep it really low key. He wanted to maintain the peace for as long as possible. But yeah, I mean, Hitler decided to invade so late in the year, just it was supposed to be a 1 month operation, but they miscalculated, thankfully. So
we'll close with the NATO summit, but just to add to that, you should know the new history is that they are equally evil, Nazi Germany and Soviet Union, because of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was signed after 15 other European states signed non-aggression pacts with Nazi Germany. But that's what they always point to. You see, they're the same. They're the two sides of the same evil coin. That's the new history you should know.
Yeah. No, it's what they're pumping out. It's what all the books that they promote are saying. Snyder, is it Timothy Snyder?
Timothy.
Yeah, he was the big, he had the biggest book pushing that narrative. It's totally false, and it's deliberately dishonest, and they're just trying to warp young minds with a false history. That's plain and simple.
Timothy Snyder is basically to the Soviet Union what Adrian Zenz and Gordon Chang are to China. Basically the same.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I was sad to see that Gordon Chang is an advisor for JFK. That's demoralizing. But Cornel West
RFK
is
Jr.
the new did I say JFK?
That's our
RFK Jr.
A bit of foreshadowing.
That's unfortunate that he's running as a Democrat and that Gordon Chang is one of his advisors. But yeah, Cornel West, I think that's good news. He's running as a third party. He's probably not going to be on the ballot in most states, but we can still try and promote him and raise awareness because he definitely offers a far better alternative. So, but July 10th, is that what it is? July 10th, the NATO meeting?
I know it's July. I'm not sure about exactly.
First part of July, and so certain countries are threatening that if there's not a full-blown, decision by NATO to intervene, that certain governments are going to take it upon themselves to intervene, with a coalition of the willing, ostensibly. So, what is the prospect of that actually happening and being a tremendous cataclysmic escalation that is gonna, be historic? One of the biggest events of the century.
I can't rule it out, but I think it's insane, and I hope people discover that it's insane. This was said by this Rasmussen guy, a previous NATO guy, but I just want to bring up something that was said by Zelensky before the launching of the counteroffensive, when he said, it looks like, I don't want us to be left alone with Russia. If it will be so, then it will be so. But this is a treacherous policy from the point of view of certain partners. It's about partnership. It is about the fact that they are still afraid of Russia and want to earn economically. After he said, the day after the dam attack, because apparently the dangling of the membership in NATO is just not going to be fulfilled, which everybody knew except for him. So he wants security guarantees just to go to this summit in Vilnius. And that's why this guy said if he doesn't get other security guarantees, then probably Poland and the Balts want to go in. I couldn't imagine a stupider scenario. I hope they know that that's the end of NATO as a formation, as we know it. Yeah. Is there a possibility? Sure, there are insane people, especially in the Polish leadership, but I fail to see it. It's a smaller army than Ukraine was before it began. I don't know if the military leaders, I'm sure they have a realistic assessment of their capabilities. I would hope for that.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're optimistic. I'm not persuaded that hasn't always been the plan, just to incrementally increase the incremental escalations until we're at full-blown World War III. What other options does the U.S. have to maintain their hegemony?
They don't have any.
Their other option is surrender. So given these two options, surrender or continue to escalate, I'm not sure that they've reached their peak escalation. And I can definitely see, continuing incremental escalation, and that would be a big one.
Yeah, sure. And it could lead to some mistakes that lead to a nuke. But I just don't see it in that light. Come on, the US, of course, is out of option. They're out of West Asia, which used to be called the Middle East, where the Gulf states are forming their own independent navy right now under the leadership of Iran. Their story about China, the Xinjiang Uyghurs, was ripped apart because of these people in the Arab League who sent a delegation there and said, oh, it's a green bill of health. It's absolutely not what the US said. And Adrian Zenz was very upset about that. They have no influence in Asia. They have no influence in the Middle East. Zero in Africa, as we've been seeing for weeks now. Even South America, it's just slipping out of their grip, which means that they might be vicious. But I think this looks like, hold me to this later because this is speculation, the time for the regime around Zelensky is absolutely ticking. It's running out. It is running out. Two people, very important people, Nikolai Patrushev and, of course, Medvedev, have been saying basically this is a new goal to the SMO. It wasn't there on the first day, saying that the Kiev terrorist regime, it has to be ended. That wasn't there a couple of weeks ago. And that is serious. These are serious people. So, okay, Poland, do you want Galicia? I don't know what the answer to that will be, but maybe you can have it. If you want to attack Russia in Ukraine, now, yeah, That's stupid, but that's a different question. I think this whole thing is petering out because according to Shoigu, this first week of the counteroffensive used up about 30% of the hardware that they had in Ukraine for the counteroffensive. That's a lot of burnt material. I think the time is running out.
Which countries are involved in this breakaway coalition?
Well, the coalition
Poland
of the
and
winning
UK for sure
is what Rasmussen said was led by Poland, which I think mean Poland's and the three Baltic midgets. Yeah, the Chihuahuas. That's pretty much what I think. I don't see Czechs, Slovaks, even Romanians being involved in this, although Moldova has been a very tricky player over this last week, apparently inviting Ukraine forces, to seize that large cache of ammunition and do operations on the soil. This is Maya Sandu, who was butthurt because Russia never takes her country seriously, and she's got these delusions of grandeur, Zelensky style. That's a possibility, but I don't see anybody else actually willing to commit to fight.
That's a sure way to get the Russians to move through Odessa to Transnistria.
For
Good
example,
moves, whatever her name. And my understanding is the president of Moldova is basically an honorary sort of thing, a ceremonial thing that the prime minister really holds power. But she's sort of been talking like she's talking out of her hat. But
she's on PR campaign. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would say I would add two other countries to that coalition, Great Britain and the United States. I'm pretty sure they're in the background somewhere. So I wouldn't rule out something really stupid going on.
With what? I mean, Great Britain, I don't know which guy this was, but he said we could fight a war of this intensity for maybe 2 days. That's all.
Yeah, 25,000 active troops they have.
I mean, okay, what are you going to do with that?
Nothing.
In a conflict this intense.
Have a big picnic.
Yeah, I mean they could bankroll a mercenary army. The U.S. The U.S. isn't gonna send in regular U.S. military forces, and Britain wouldn't do that either. But they would bankroll and continue trying to just
apparently
do as much damage as they could.
The UK posted some jobs like that on the interwebs in the Middle East, like sign up for mercenary ship, and at the end you might get citizenship. In the West.
The thing about mercenaries are, I don't know the rough figures now, but I remember maybe back in the Iran-Contra days, I was looking up what a U.S. serviceman made in a day, and all of his accoutrements, all the perks, all the GDP perks. It was $135 a day, whereas Blackwater was charging $1,300 a day for one of their people. So how long, the U.S. debt is already, some people say 23 trillion, some people say 32 trillion, whatever it is, that's not pocket change. And so I can't see them going out and putting together a 100,000 man mercenary force, no matter what they pay these people. And the other thing that I find interesting is how much Vietnam rhetoric talk about people like from McCourse and McGregor. People are now making these parallels, these comparisons between the escalation in Vietnam and the escalation in Ukraine. So, we have a couple of minutes. Anything on that?
I wish we had time for the debt ceiling crisis, but yes, one of the presidents who said, I'm not going to put troops, boots on the ground in Vietnam. And as soon as he was elected a year later, he put boots on the ground. I don't see that happening, especially from the US. But, Germany is a weird player who said, we're not going to send tanks. Then we send tanks. And by the way, we've got the first pictures of those leopards and the Iris-T system being taken out by Russia. And then they send them. And now they're talking about, well, maybe we're going to send F-16. I don't know. This is Pistorius, the new defense minister. They've been the ones who always said, not this, but then we'll send them. We're not going to send this, and then they send them. Maybe. I don't think that changes the course of this war 1 inch in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, those F-16s, they're not going to do anything, really. I mean, they can't take off from anything but a pristine airstrip, and they need a lot of maintenance, and none of that infrastructure is in place in Crimea or in Ukraine.
In Ukraine, yeah.
The whole talk of F-16s is just.
So what if they take off from Poland? Come on, don't they know that those are become targets? I mean, there's two of these big companies, BAE Systems, which is British, and the Rheinmetall Corporation in Germany. They both said, we're going to build these big factories in Ukraine. I hope they've been paying attention for the last couple of weeks of all the missiles, ballistic missiles, and the rockets flying into such manufacturing sites. Don't they know that's not a good investment? It won't last.
So anyway, I'm hoping that the Great Reset, that World War III isn't going to be used as the pretext for the Great Reset. But, we're talking about the debt ceiling. I just, like the West is at the end of its rope. And that's what they need is, a global conventional war to reset everything and start over. That's capitalism. I mean, that's how it always has been. So I'm still a little worried. Still a little worried that's the plan. Escalate, conventional World War III. A lot of societies are destroyed, and then Great Reset. Eat bugs.
I'm sure that's the Western plan, but the West has to get used to it not being the main player in the world anymore. So I'll end on that hopeful note and give it over to Carlo. I wish we had more time.
I'm sorry for being pessimistic.
Nah, thank you guys very much. Take care.
Do you wish your business makes it to the top list of the most searched for business in the US and around the world? Or are you searching for halal compliant services and products online? Then Halal Finder is your online resource directory pointing you to the right places and products. Let's help you explore halal products and services of your choice as we manage many halal businesses across the world. Promote your business with halalfinder.com, the only